question for all of you. Fascinated with technology and the ability for unmanned technology, drones or underwater vehicles, and is there a possibility to use those in the Arctic for exploration for whatever we're looking for, whether it's minerals or whether it's the determination of sea ice thickness? I'd love to hear your thoughts about using technology in that environment and some of the challenges that maybe that environment presents to the use of technology. So, Admiral?
Thank you, Congressman Duncan. Yes, sir. We have the Naval Oceanography Program has significant experience in concert with the Office of Naval Research in operating unmanned systems across the world to better characterize the ocean in support of our warfighting requirements. And we've conducted experiments and exercises in the Arctic region with autonomous systems and autonomous sensing systems, including unmanned underwater vehicles and drifting floats and profilers. And actually, we will demonstrate another example of these technologies during this ICE exercise I alluded to in my opening statement. There are challenges in operating in this difficult environment due to the nature of sea ice and the hazardous conditions it imposes on sensors. But as we continue to practice and experiment, we're learning how to address those challenges. But in my opinion, if you look at the nature of and the need for unmanned systems to address the dull, dirty, and dangerous type of work they're best suited for, the Arctic is an environment perfectly suited for those kind of technologies.
So we're seeing this International Space Station and a lot of satellite data being used, looking at the Arctic for changes. Do you trust being able to measure sea ice thickness or temperature from space?
Yes, Congressman, we do actually. We're actively employing a Canadian synthetic aperture radar sensor on one of their satellites as part of the mission of our Naval and National Ice Center, which provides operational predictions of ice movement, sea ice movement for operating forces in the region. This is an international collaborative effort with the Coast Guard and our Canadian allies. And again, that center will be used in a prominent way for this ice exercise in March of 2016 to best locate the ice camp where our two submarines will surface and conduct the exercise.
Yeah. Is there any margin of error there? Have you noticed any differences between measurements taken from space and what you may find actually on the surface?
Yes, sir. There is a fair amount. There is uncertainty. I couldn't characterize the exact amount, and I'd like to take that for the record. But we have a strong confidence in our satellite sensing capabilities. But as in any region, the best use is sort of a suite of capabilities that include in situ sensors as well as remote sensors from satellite, for example, or radar, and those work in a complementary way to best characterize a given physical environment. So that applies in the Western Pacific as it does in the Arctic.
Right. Thank you. I want to shift gears here, Admiral Papp. We see China's incursions into the South China Sea, specifically the Spratlys. These are atolls, underwater shallow reefs that have been built upon. So as they continue to violate what I think the international law in the South China Sea, has the administration considered moving to revoke some of the privileges we have granted China in the international community, such as their observer status in the Arctic Council?
Well, sir, part of the response has been in that particular area of the world, work between the State Department and the Department of Defense, freedom of navigation exercises demonstrating U.S. will and commitment to stand against those illegal proclamations of waters in the South China Sea. But it's isolated that, much like we have isolated the sanctions on Russia in response to their incursions in Ukraine and Crimea, yet we're still able to work within the Arctic. We are hopeful that we can use the Arctic as a place where we can continue to have communications, primarily through the Arctic Council, where China is an observer state. So at this juncture, we are not under consideration or not considering revoking their status as an observer, but certainly that's one of the options we could look at in the future.
Okay. Thank you for that. Admiral Gallaudet, while the Arctic is a low-threat environment and likely will remain so, I think our Navy needs to be ready to serve anywhere, anytime. Does the Navy have the gear and infrastructure to operate in the high north if needed? Just help educate us and what some of the challenges and the type gear that you see the need for or are utilizing today.
Yes, Chairman Duncan. The short answer is yes for the current requirements. The combatant commanders that operate in the Arctic region, U.S. Northern Command and U.S. European Command and U.S. Pacific Command, they have not stated a requirement for continuous presence by Navy surface vessels. However, our submarine force is well equipped to operate in the region and has been doing so since 1958 with the first under ice deployment of the USS Nautilus. And in fact, this year, the USS Seawolf just returned from a very successful operational deployment across the Arctic. So the primary requirements we see today are through maritime domain awareness or Arctic domain awareness, and we have the aviation assets as well as remote sensing capabilities that can fill that mission, as well as the undersea requirements that our submarine force is well suited for. As I mentioned in my opening statement, our Arctic roadmap is designed to look at future requirements in concert with the demands that the combatant commanders may levy upon the U.S. Navy to ensure that we build that capability and capacity for increased surface presence or any other kind of operations.